In this list, we'll be going over the top 10 fire spells in Wizard 101 history. Alright, at number 10, we have Incendiate. Incendiate is a spell that costs 6 pips and has the effect where it will detonate all damage over time effects and double the damage. So for example, we'll take Fire Orb's 210 damage that occurs over the course of 3 rounds. The dot will detonate and deal 420 damage instead. Now naturally, Incendiate is just detonate, but of course twice as good. And it's a good thing that it's only an item card, because if Incendiate can be trained, then Fire would undoubtedly be the best school in the game by a landslide. Incendiate goes hand in hand with Scowl, as there is a strat that will basically allow you to clear enemies like it's nothing. Here's how it works. Let's say you have a team of a balance or basically any support in the first slot. Someone in the second slot with Mass Feint, a really strong Fire Wizard in the third slot with a lot of damage, and the person in the last slot with Incendiate. The way you set it up is, player in the first slot blades the Fire Wizard, player in the second slot uses Mass Feint, player in the third slot uses Scowl, and player in the fourth slot uses Incendiate. This strat is godlike, however it takes the player in the fourth slot running a decathlon deck that gives an extra pip for this strat to be able to be pulled off on the first turn. Either way, Incendiate is amazing and is a solid way to start off the list. At number 9, we have King Artorius. King Artorius is a spell that costs 8 pips and is a single target hit that does 835 damage and then afterwards gives you a 10% Pierce Blade and stuns. Jesus, I'm just now realizing how many spells in this game are just straight PvP banned, but anyways, King Art is a very solid option, especially compared to something like Sun Serpent where, yeah, it does slightly more on the high end and then has splash damage, but it's usually not worth 10 pips in my opinion. Like Sun Serpent having that AoE damage at the end is kind of weird to me, as if you're going to use an AoE, then you might as well use a normal AoE. And if we need a single target beefer hit, use King Art, or even a free, or a S'more Machine, etc. But Sun Serpent just kind of tries to do both, and in the process ends up being worse than King Art, and also worse than every AoE in the game. At number 8, we have Fire Prism, and yes, you can go ahead and throw Mass Fire Prism on here as well, as its effect is that it converts your incoming fire damage to the opposite school, which is ice. Prisms, no matter what, are always going to be necessary in some instance or another, even though yes, sometimes they have to be ran reluctantly. Now for people who are still bringing prisms into mob fights, I'll be honest, it's not worth it. Most mobs in the game don't really have much resist, and so let's say you're fighting 2 mobs of the same school, which you usually are, and they just so happen to be the school that you're playing. It's more beneficial to just blade stack a bit more rather than using a pip to mass prism, or using 2 back-to-back turns just to individually prism both mobs. However, this isn't the case all the time, as there are in fact mobs in the game that do have a bunch of resist. Darkmoor mobs are a good example. But either way, prism is a must use in a lot of situations, and it would be insane not to mention in this video. Alright, number 7, we have Backdraft. Backdraft is a spell that will place a 15% per pip trap on the enemy, so essentially it's a supercharge that goes on the opponent instead. I feel like Backdraft gets forgotten about a lot, as it's really good into bosses that don't allow blading. Now yes, this will take all your pips, but it's definitely worth it in the right situation. At max pips, Backdraft has the potential to increase the damage of your hit by 210%, which is a lot of stacking that can be bypassed. If you're in a hard boss fight where you have to spend a lot of time protecting yourself, and you aren't getting much breathing room to set up a hit, then Backdraft is a really good option, because let's say it's one of those fights where a lot of just stuff is happening in regards to cheats, and maybe you can't really get anything going in terms of blade stacking or just any offensive moves for that matter. You can spend time fortifying and protecting / healing yourself while simultaneously saving up pips, then go for a max pip Backdraft play that will bypass a lot of setup. This is especially good for bosses who have oppressive heal cheats where you just have to one-shot and chip damage isn't going to cut it. Backdraft truly is, in the right situations, a god spell, and definitely deserves a spot on this list, no doubt. Alright, at number 6, we have Fire Trap. Fire Trap is a spell that places a 30% increased fire damage trap on the enemy, and this is a great time to bring up a somewhat problem with traps. Why are traps 30% and blades 35? Considering that A, past the first world of the game you fight multiple enemies, and traps will only increase the damage dealt on that one enemy you place the trap on. It makes traps useful, but blades will always be used infinitely more. I'm almost positive KingsIsle has some sort of data on what the most used spells in the game are, and if they did, we clearly see that the blade to trap ratio is just beyond bad. With that being said, traps are still good and useful in the right situations, but I personally think traps should be buffed in this game. Make them give 40% base, and suddenly I think they'll probably get played infinitely more. Similar to how Amplify and Attenuate are similar, however Amplify only increases your damage by 15% but goes on yourself, while Attenuate increases damage by 20% but goes on the enemy. I think the relationship between blades and traps should work the same way. But I don't know, let me know what you guys think. Alright, number 5, we have Fire from Above, the pre-nerf version of course. Yeah, I'm including a pre-nerf spell on this list because it is a legitimate shame how much they gutted Fire from Above. The original Fire from Above was a shadow spell that costs 5 pips, 1 shadow pip, and has the effect where it dealt 1100 to 1300 damage, then places 3 25% fire traps on the enemy afterwards. So listen, I won't be delusional. 1100 to 1300 damage is beyond busted, even for a shadow spell. This would literally be 300 damage more than current Sun Serpent, so that's just a no, obviously. That definitely cannot stay the way it is. And the 3 fire traps afterwards is just icing on the cake. Now after this, Fire from Above would obviously see changes. Later down the road, the damage got dropped to 720 to 840, but it kept the added effect of placing 3 fire traps. This kind of sucks because now the damage is basically just King Art with traps, making Fire from Above worse than King Art, because at least King Art gives you a 10% pierce and stuns. Then it got somewhat buffed again to deal 960 to 1080 damage, with the big difference of course being the damage, and instead of placing 3 traps, it only places 1. Now after this, the spell will get completely changed to a damage overtime spell only. Kind of like Heckhound and how it doesn't do initial damage, and instead the damage doesn't come in until the damage overtime happens, where it will put a down on the enemy that lasts 5 rounds equaling 1260 damage. As you can imagine, this is trash, but then afterwards they just made the spell even worse. After this, it gets nerfed one more time to what it is today, which is an absolute garbage excuse of a spell. I know a lot of you are thinking, Sniffy, what's the point of putting this spell on this list if it's trash now? And the simple answer is, any opportunity I get to roast this spell, I will take. Wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a running gag on my channel, where I would just randomly throw shade to Fire from Above, because it's just that bad and it deserves it. Current Fire from Above places 3 damage over times on the enemy, equaling to 1425 damage, then follows up with 3 20% damage traps. King's Isle, this is complete trash. There's almost zero benefit to spreading out your damage over the course of this many turns. Every Fire Wizard looks at this spell with complete disgust now, and it's an absolute joke compared to what it was when it first came out. So just a reminder that pre-nerf FFA is a spell that takes the number 5 spot, because it was Fire's best single target spell for a very long time, until it got completely gutted. Real quick before we get into the next entry, this is what the gurus of YouTube call a call to action, but it would mean the world to me if you guys could hit that subscribe button and just leave a comment saying hey or something. I'm really close to 10k subs and I would love to hit it by the end of the year. It would mean the world to me. That being said, I hope you guys are enjoying yourselves, and we're back to the video. At number 5, for real this time, we have S'more Machine. S'more Machine is a shadow spell that costs 5 pips, 1 shadow pip, and has the effect where it will deal 960 to 1080 damage, then places 3 35% traps in the enemy afterwards. Alright, so pretty much what FFA should be. I know there's going to be a few comments saying, well, current FFA is closer to Fire's school identity, and that is true, but I don't care. It still sucks. Anyways, current S'more Machine is Fire's best single target hit, and is simply what FFA should be right now. And then, I don't know, it gives S'more Machine its own niche. Maybe up its damage a bit and give it a stun. Maybe instead of placing a fire trap, have it place a universal trap or give you a fire blade back. Because obviously if they reverted FFA, then these two would just be the same spell damn near. So I think a cool separator, if they were to revert FFA, is to give S'more Machine a unique effect. Like an add-on bubble. That would be pretty cool actually. But still, either way, S'more Machine is the actual number 5 on this list, no question. At number 4, we have Raging Bull. Raging Bull is a shadow spell that costs 6 pips, 1 shadow pip, and has the effect where it does 710 to 860 damage to all enemies, then detonates a damage over time that's on any of them, which is a pretty cool add-on. Raging Bull is easily Fire's best shadow spell, and it's worth running a copy in the deck for sure, despite how inconsistent shadow pips are. With the epic enchant, you get a clean looking 1010 to 1160 damage, and of course one of the coolest animations in the game for sure. Raging Bull is fantastic, but isn't Fire's best AoE. It's close though. At number 3, we have Meteor Strike. Meteor Strike is a 4-pip spell that has the effect where it simply deals 305 to 345 damage to the enemy. It goes without saying that out of all the 4-pip AoE spells in this game, Meteor Strike is the second best. Well, I guess technically it is the best because Tempest isn't a 4-pip AoE, even though it's kind of in the same window of when every single school in this game gets its first solid AoE. But yeah, I guess when you do think about it like that, Meteor Strike is the best 4-pip AoE in the game. By level 40-ish, you can basically cast this on your first turn, add an enchant to it, and you're burning through mobs no problem. Also, another spell with a super fast and satisfying animation on top of that. At number 2, we have Fire Dragon. Fire Dragon is a 7-pip spell that has the effect where it deals 540 initial damage and 435 damage over the course of the next 3 rounds, equaling to 975 damage in total. On top of having some awesome card art, Fire Dragon is pretty much Fire's best AoE. It has very solid initial damage, and the overtimes are good for dealing with pesky shields or making up for the damage on the back end to finish off an enemy. You can also go ahead and throw the item card version down here if you want, as the dots are gone, but it does hit for a clean 680 damage, which is surprisingly a significant amount more than Elephant. With that being said, Fire Dragon is fantastic, but every spell on this list falls short to 1 spell. And in fact, every spell on this list except for this one can only truly shine with this spell. At number 1, we have Fireblade. Fireblade is a spell that costs 0 pips and has the effect where it applies a 35% fire damage charm on yourself. Naturally, Fireblade is Fire's best spell without a doubt, as no matter what, it's the only spell in this game that isn't replaceable at all. If you don't feel like using Fire Dragon, you can use Meteor. If you need more damage than both, go Raging Bull. If you need a beefy single target damage spell, go King Art. If you need to pump out more damage, go S'more Machine. With that being said, if you want any chance at increasing the damage of any of those spells I just mentioned, then Fireblade has you, and you can't replace it with anything unless the fight specifically forces you to. Or in other words, if you're fighting a cheating boss that doesn't allow blading or something. Like I said, every single other fire spell in this game is basically replaceable depending on the situation, but Fireblade is the only one that is pretty much 99.9% of the time you will use no matter what. Also, another reason why Fireblade is this many places higher than Fire Trap is because if you use Fireblade and cast a Fire Dragon, for example, The damage will be increased for not only the initial hit, but the overtime damage as well. However, if you use Fire Trap, then Fire Dragon, then only the initial hit will do more damage, and the damage over time remains unaffected, which is another reason why traps in this game should get a small buff in my opinion. But alright, that's the list. Are there any spells that I missed or may have forgotten about? Let me know down in the comments. Hope you all enjoyed this one. Top 10 ice spells are coming next naturally, and as always, I'll see you all in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and take care.